Okay, so I'm Lucy Cannon-Neel. I am a citizen of the Nulhegan tribe of the Coosuk Abenaki Nation. We are based out of the Northeast Kingdom, and this is the Northeast Kingdom. Our headquarters, we have tribal lands in Barton, Vermont. We also have tribal lands in Wheelock, Vermont. And our chief, though, he lives in Shelburne, so most of the paperwork and the addresses will say Shelburne, but we're based out of here. We have the Nulhegan Education and Cultural Center that is at the Old Holland School. I had been the school nurse there for many, many years, and when the school closed, it had laid vacant for about 3 years, so I thought, no, let's do something. We also started the Nulhegan, it's called the Holland Food Shelf. So we are tackling food disparity, and I'm also the health and equity coordinator for the tribe. So since we've been at Holland School, we have brought in screenings during COVID. We did COVID vaccinations there, and we still do flu vaccinations and COVID. This year the flu vaccinations just made my heart happy because all the local farmers came and they brought their employees. So, you know, good things, good things. We work with the Cancer Learner Center. We do skin cancer screenings, and the first time we did it, local farmers came with their employees just to have them checked. It was wonderful. So we try to do things like that. I was on the Vermont Commission of Native American Affairs for 5 years. I was chair for 4. And we were a goal-oriented group. And back then, one of the goals that was challenged to me was to apply for Title VI Indian education funds from the federal government. And I didn't think I'd ever get that. Orleans Central Supervisory Union supported me in that adventure, and by gosh, I got the grant. So since then, North Country Supervisory Union has participated in this grant, so we service that school district, and last year Caledonia Central applied. So those are the 3 supervisory unions that we service. And now with the cultural center at the Holland School, they can make a field trip and come and spend the day. So we do like a round robin. It depends how many kids there are. And in the winter time, they get theory, they get to learn drumming, singing, Indian lore, and we build a snow snake track in the back, and they get to play outside and do snow snake games. So they get well-rounded history and culture. So tonight, I'm basically going to talk about our history. We've been here, and I'm sure if you've heard the state archaeologists, we've been here for about 12 to 15,000 years, probably longer. Unfortunately, for the territory that we live, the soil and how our housing and what have you are, artifacts are hard to come by. Like out west, the fossils are there, and the environment is different, and you can find old stuff. And we can do it here, but it's very difficult. I was fortunate on the commission. This was, oh my gosh, a long time ago. They found a remnants of a longhouse up in Swanton, which is the first. We had been told, all our history is oral. It's been told by grandparents to the grandkids, and it's just been passed on like that. And so to find a remnants of a longhouse was like, oh, moment, okay? And there were 2 fire pits in this longhouse, so it kind of determined how many people lived in that longhouse. The housing back then was either a wigwam, which was mostly in the summer, you know, and then the family unit was there, or the longhouse, which was winter, but it was also year-long, but the whole clan lived there. So when I ask my kids, when we talk about the housing part, I'll ask them, who all lived in that longhouse? And they just kind of get the deer in the headlights and tell me, Abenaki people. And I'm like, I'm looking for a little more than that. So we get to mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, cousins, in-laws, outlaws, extended cousins, and we just keep going. So with the longhouse that we found, there were 2 fire pits, which told us that between 75 to 125 people resided there.
Wow.
Okay, so we did find pottery shards, we did find spear points, we found all kinds of cooking utensils. It was amazing. So it proved we were here. Back on the commission too, we have 4 state recognized tribes. We are not federally recognized, which is okay. Nulhegan, which is my tribe. The one that everybody knows about is Missisquoi up in Swan. That was a St. Francis establishment with the Jesuits way back in the day. Okay, so that's been the long-standing one. El Nu is out of Jamaica, Vermont, and what they're known for today is reenactments of the time period in the 16 and 1700s. And then there's the Coosuk tribe, and that's Lunenburg, Thetford, and in that area. And along the Connecticut River Valley. They're mostly known for their basket making. We all do basket making, but that was a staple for them to survive, especially in the 1900s, and even before that, they would sell their wares. So if we're going to talk about baskets, pack baskets, this is a small one. I have a large one on the other side. Ash baskets are what we make today. This one, it's my mom's cousin. She's my second cousin. We use black ash. And of course, you know, with the ash borer eating the ash trees, these are going to be few and far between in the more. We work with the Vermont Department, well, we work with the Preservation Department, but we also work with the environmental. And we, you know, like Silvio Conte, they had a couple of ash trees that they cut because they were damaged by this little booger. And so we harvested it and we procured the ash. And these ash baskets aren't easy to make, especially if we're starting from scratch. You cut the tree and you put it's the trunk. And you know, on the tree, the trunk is round, circles. It tells you how old the tree is, you know. Well, you put that on a sawhorse, and you take hammers, and you pound. And as you pound, that rim, part of the round part, will come off. And you keep pounding until you get the whole thing off. And it may be about that wide. And then you're going to, it kind of splinters your fingers a little bit, but you're going to separate it. It's kind of like got a cover. And then you have knives, and then you cut whatever width you want. This one is a vegetable basket. And Newt Washburn, I don't know if anybody knew him. My mom's cousin was a student of his, and she became a master basket maker. And all of Newt's baskets start with these reeds on the bottom, and they make a star. And then I've got an egg basket that my cousin had made, and the reed is so small, and then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I've had to retire it because I've shown it quite a bit, and it needs a little attention. But this is the black ash, okay? Baskets were used. We also had birch bark baskets. Birch bark baskets, well, we'll talk about this thing again in a little bit, but this is a birch bark moose call, okay? So you can see that there is some design on it, and it's kind of scratched. And that's how the designs on the birch bark baskets are made. My grandfather, I grew up in Newport Center, half in Newport Center, half in Troy. Our house was in Newport Center, our barn was in Troy. And my Pepe, my grandfather, would come and get me to pick gooseberries in the summer. And I hated picking gooseberries because what I recall is there's a little thorn at the end of them, and that would pick you. And I didn't like that. But I spent time with my grandpa, and he would talk to, now I'm 8, 9, 10 years old. He'd go up and he'd put his hands on the tree and he would talk to the tree. Well, if you're 8, 9, 10 years old, you're thinking, whoo-hoo, you know. But he was thanking the tree for giving up the bark. And he would cut a layer of bark. And Pepe could do it in such a way that that bark would grow back. So he would take the bark and make a square, and then he'd take the ends, and then he'd take strips off the top. And with those strips, he'd sew up the sides. And I had a canoe. And my canoe was my container for my gooseberries. I have to do this, gooseberries. And so that's what we had. And when we got recognition, we had to talk about our genealogy, and we had to talk about what in our culture was a little sort of different than everybody else. And so I told the story of Pepe taking me for gooseberries. And they said, oh, well, do you have the canoe he made you? And I said, I was 8, 9, 10 years old. We didn't save anything. We played with it until it, you know. But I smiled and I says, well, you know, I have the one he made my grandmother while they were dating. And I used to show it. I don't anymore because it's very, very fragile now. But on it, Meme had put a Red Cross pin, because Pepe used to give blood all the time. And the pin circa 1932. So it helped authenticate the age of my canoe. So it's put away in a place of honor. And so I had something to say. The genealogy part, because legislature, they gave us guidelines. There's a state statute that gave us what we had to produce to be able to be a recognized state tribe. It was kind of hairy because we really didn't want to give our genealogy knowing the past history of Vermont. And if some of you don't know, Vermont had a very extensive eugenics program. It started in 1900. It had been talked about prior to that. It started as an agricultural issue to be able to produce more crops for the cattle, for the farmers. That's how it started. And then as it went along, Henry Perkins was a professor at UVM, and he, in his wisdom, thought that Vermont's native people, gypsy people, people of physical disability or mentally disability, we needed to make these people go away. And there's a book called Breeding Better Vermonters, which talks all about the eugenics program. And a couple of years back, we had to talk about our history in that regard to legislature to get an apology, which we've gotten the apology. And I went to testify, and because I never thought it affected us, my family. My Pepe would always say, if you see a black car pull in, you go hide. Just go hide. And I never thought anything of it. I was just an itty bitty kid. And it was, they'd be gone. The chief of the Coosuk tribe, Shirley Hook, her grandmother had passed away, and they went through her belongings, and they found a letter. So when the families were separated, the girls went to St. Joseph's School for Girls, the boys went to Virgins, and they went to Brandon School for Boys. And they were not allowed to speak their language, and they had to acclimate into the English society. So this letter was from her mother, her grandmother, asking for the boys to come home to help her work on the farm. And it was from the director of Brandon School for Boys, and he said that your children are idiots and they cannot leave. And this letter was gut-wrenching, and that letter was read into the testimony of the eugenics program. The thing that hit me the hardest, okay, was, so we're going to do this part and get it over with so we can do some fun stuff after. was this flyer my chief put up on the thing. And it's a advertisement to talk about the eugenics program in 1927. And there's a swastika on there. And that just hit me in the face. And then the more that I learned that Henry Perkins, the professor at UVM, reached out to other people, or other people reached out to him, I'm not sure which. But he became correspondence with Adolf Hitler. And their correspondence in the archives at UVM, you can see those letters and what have you. And Hitler took our program here and brought it there. And that was in the late 30s and 40s. This thing is from 1927. It came from here. Like I said, I didn't think that it affected me or my family. And then the more I thought about it, my dad's mom died when he was a month old. And the story was appendicitis. This program went until 1975. I graduated in 74. So I did research on my grandmother, because then I started thinking, you know, all these women that were sterilized after a delivery, or abdominal issue, appendicitis, gallbladder, and they came back sterile. So I thought maybe that's what happened to her. Well, my dad's cousin is still alive. She's 96 years old. So I went to visit her. And she recanted the night my grandmother got sick. And now I believe that she did have a ruptured appendix, and I believe she had peritonitis. She talked about Pepe putting the pie pans on the wood stove to heat them up, and to put them on her tummy to keep her calm and to keep her coming. Well, you put heat on an appendix, it's going to pop. And so I believe that that's what happened to her. She had peritonitis and she passed away. But what I didn't know was my dad's oldest sister was sterilized after having an illegitimate child. She was an undesirable. So I proceeded to try to find that child, which I did. And that child is my mother's age. And so I've gotten to meet her and what have you. My aunt worked on a farm with her husband for all those years, and we were always told something else, that it wasn't her that was the problem, it was him that was the problem, something to do with mumps. And anyway, that was the story, but she was an undesirable. So that kind of hurts people's hearts a little bit. So to get recognition, to go back to that, it was a little difficult for us to say who we were, because back then they would write to Odanak and find out who was related to who, so that they could go looking. My chief's grandmother has been hiding for years because they were looking for her. She had a club foot. That's what they were looking for her for, because she was not normal like everybody else. So anyway, we were able to get state recognition. We do get some federal amenities. So we're getting right now the best of both worlds. My Title VI Indian Education Program, we get funds for. Okay, we are allowed now to carry eagle feathers, and the repository, we have a license through the repository to have eagle feathers. Otherwise, for everybody else, it's against the law. And so there's little things that help us out too. So my program for Indian Ed is for, I'll go anywhere. I've got a friend that's a scouter, Carrie Ann. She's a chef. She cooks at Boy Scout camp. She's also the home school coordinator for Rutland. And she calls and she says, Luce, we're going to do a food drive. And I made it a competition with all the schools. You're the prize. So far, I've been to Castleton to do a presentation for their schools. And this year, I went to Orwell and did a presentation for their school. So I got the feeling next year is going to be Fairhaven. But anyway, but I'll go. It's not a problem. They need to know that we are still here. And I'm going to just add this out there. My sister and I, a couple before COVID, we went to Canada and we were touring the area. And we went to Pierreville, where Abenaki Res is, and did the museum there. And they have this little IMAX theater, and in the theater they have the creation story. And so I'm watching it, and it's Lake Champlain. And it's about the stone people, and how the stone people came to be, and then how the ash people were developed. And I'm listening to this, and I'm going, I've heard this story before. And then I said to my sister, I said, we gotta wait for the credits. I says, because I think I know the people who did this. And they're all Nulhegan people. Joseph Bruchac, Jesse Bruchac, Marge Bruchac. They made that, but Abenak's showing it, but that's okay. We're all related. I mean, we've had relatives back and forth, not a big deal. So now we're gonna go back 20,000 years. We talked a little bit about housing. Hunting was more of a guy thing. Women did hunt. There were some very gifted women. So back in those days, 15, 20,000 years ago, they used spears, they used bow and arrow. With the spears, they had an apparatus called an addle-addle. Now this one is my favorite because I'm pretty good with this one. The spear end goes here, the feather part is here, it sits right on here. So your spears can be 5 feet long, 6 feet long, okay? And the apparatus is going to be like that, okay? Maybe even bigger, longer. So it took a hunting party back then of 9 to a dozen people to hunt, because you have to remember the animals were a whole lot larger in that time. So the animals were bear, moose, deer, caribou. We had caribou here. We did not have buffalo. A lot of the little kids will go, oh, buffalo. No, we didn't have the buffalo. So anyway, and I tell the kids, it's just like shooting a bow. You know, if anybody has done archery, you pull that right back to your ear, and then you discharge it. Okay, so this is this one. The other style I'm not so good at. It's a thong right here. So you're holding your spear. Okay, and then again, it's that long and choom. Okay, so this is that one.
So the first one, they did a frontier camp. They made those.
Yes, yeah. And well, that one was gifted to me by Red.
Oh.
So, but actually they both were. So, spear points were made with chert. Okay, this is moose hide, so you guys will get to feel this. On this side are spear points. One of these, when I go to meet my maker, goes back to the state. I had a friend that was a scouter that made this for me as a gift, and all of these were found in Vermont. And one of these is 10,000 years old. So, yeah, Jesse Robinson at the state goes, Luce, that comes back. I said, it will, but right now it's staying here. So the rudimetric ones back in those days, 20,000, they're just rectangles with a line right down the middle. That's this one right here. It's just a rectangle with a simple line right down the middle. This one down here is 5,000 years old. This one, I think, and I had an archaeologist look at it, he thinks that it was a start of a spear point, but it didn't fleck well, so it's just there. And the rest of these are 3,000 and 4,000 years old. So everything on the animal was used, okay? When I first moved back to Vermont, I lived in Florida for 25 years, but I'm from here. So I bought my parents' hobby farm in Holland, so I have 40 acres in the country. So at that time we thought we would raise turkeys. We knew nothing about raising turkeys. We did not know that turkeys would grow to be 40 and 50 pounds. And we did not know that once they slumped at that big, you need to kill them right off because they are not getting back up. So we had an education. So I took their legs and made rattles. So everything was used on the animals. This is my sewing kit. I'm not going to pass this around, but my needle is part bone. It's bone. My thread is sinew. Sinew is the tendons in the back of the leg. Okay, you dry it. It gets pithy like string, and then you wet it and use it to sew. Okay. Oh, one of them fell. Oh no, it's in my hand. No, it's not. It's somewhere. This bone is an awl. Punch a hole through the leather so that you can sew. There's a smaller one, but it's here somewhere. I'm sure it's in the pouch. We use parts to make rattles. Anybody want to take a guess?
Claws.
Close, not a claw. Deer toes. And we use deer toes to make a rattle. Or we can put them on our clothes for design. But everything from the animal was used. Bladders were used to haul water. Everything was used. I've got some bear fur here, so you can feel the different textures between the moose and the bear. I have rabbit fur, but everybody kind of knows how soft that is. So everything was used on the animal. Okay, this is a pouch I made 100 years ago. My button is a bear claw. Okay, so nothing went to waste. Everything was used. We were hunter-gatherers. So yes, we hunted, we fished. In the wintertime, we had to keep chiseling that snow, that ice, so that we could get to the fish. And I'm an ice fisherman, okay? I love it. I teach Boy Scouts how to ice fish in the wintertime. We have this thing called Winter Trek, so that's what I teach. So I had them jigging this year, and they thought that was the weirdest thing. And of course, when I started pulling my string, they said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I got a fish." And they go, "No, you don't." I said, "I got a fish." So I had a perch that big. And the kids were saying, "Do we catch and release?" I said, "Oh yeah, you're going to release in that bucket right there. That's mine." And I did. I had fresh perch for supper. But and then we talked about, well, it's wintertime. What are you going to use for bait? You know, so some of them came up with some old meat that had gone bad, and I said, yeah, that's correct. And I said, there's other things too, you know, and I had to make them think about it. And I said, well, you're not going to eat all the fish, are you? And they had to think about it. And then we came down to the eyeballs, and I said, but they had to stay warm. So how do you think that they kept them warm? And they looked at me really strange, and they go, "Oh, well, you put them in a pouch and you keep them right here." I says, "Yeah, you could do that, but that won't be warm enough." And they're thinking about it, and then finally I'll go, and then inevitably one will say, "Well, Miss Lucy, have you ever done that? Put the fish eyeballs in your mouth?" And I went, "Yes, once." And it was weird. So we left it at that.
That's how eye teeth were found, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. And but anyway, fishing, hunting, we were hunter-gatherers, we were gardeners. So the story that you hear mostly about is the Three Sisters Garden, okay? It was probably more like 7 sisters. Because there was sunflowers. There were various types of sunflowers also that we had. But it was beans, corn, and squash. So what you guys today called raised bed gardening was basically what we did back then, but it was mound gardening. So we would take that mound, and a lot of those fish guts went into that mound, you know, to keep that nitrogen and stuff in there. And but there was mound. First the corn was planted, and as the corn grew, the green bean was planted. and then that grew up the corn stalk and kind of hung down. Then the squash, and you know the squash has big old honking leaves, right? So the dew came on and it protected from weeds, and it kept the mound kind of moist. And then in the fall, like the leaves of the trees turn color and then they drop and they turn brown, so don't these big old leaves, and it goes back into the soil, so it replenishes. But our corn wasn't as big as it is today. We've done some after-school programs where we've planted, and we're trying to do the heritage seeds back then and bring them back. So this is Abenaki rose corn. This is as big as it gets. So it took a lot to make a little, you know. So, and then there was the flint corn. The flint corn was a little bit larger, and it was a deep rust color. I thought I had one, but I don't. So, it's probably one of my other teachers has got it. So the flint corn. So the corn was harvested, it was dried. A lot of the foods were dried, okay? I'll look at the kids and try to get them to talk about drying meat. And we would make slabs, and everything was sun-dried. Berries were sun-dried. Meat was sun-dried. Vegetables were sun-dried. Everything was sun-dried, so that we could use them in the winter and in the spring before everything came up. We used birch bark baskets to contain things. We also had pottery, and this is a replica. I'm going to make a real one here in a couple of weeks. This is an Abenaki pot. It's a replica. It has not been fired so that you can cook with it. So our time period, we did coil pottery. So you'd roll it out like a snake, and you'd do around and around and around, and you'd flatten it out, and then you'd do around and around and around and shape it. Some of the designs on these pots were from weaving vines. And I have pottery shards. Being on the commission, you got friendly with the archaeologists, so you got stuff. These all came out of Lake Champlain. I started with 8. They've slowly disintegrated over the time. The bigger ones are 2,500 years old. The smaller ones are 1,500 years old. The bigger ones, the grass that was, or the vines that were weaved were pretty big. These smaller ones, you can see that the weave got a little tighter. And I always tell the kids, when you practice something, you get better at it. So you have to keep practicing. And I said, and that's what they did. And if you look on the other side, some of them are pretty burnt, but some of them you can see the coil, or, you know. So here you go.
You sure you want to pass those around?
I had this little kid. I put them all in his hands, and he looked up at me with these big eyes, and he goes, I've got history in my hands. It doesn't get any better than that. Doesn't get any better than that. So we'll go back to hunting. Like I said, all the parts of the animals were used. This is some turkey bones. And this is a turkey collar. Now when I started to practice on this, I was doing it wrong, because I was trying to blow and make a sound. And then somebody taught me, and I called a friend. I says, I can't make a turkey sound to save my soul. And he goes, because you're doing it wrong. You're supposed to call your cat. And that's what you're supposed to do. Well, I sat on my back porch and I practiced until 3 turkeys showed up. 2 hens and a male. And I'll tell you, that Tom, he had his feathers out and he was doing the dance. So I don't practice on my back porch anymore. My 40 acres, they can go and play. So anyway, we'll see if we've got any turkeys in here. And I did this at Brighton State Park, and there was some old guy in the back, and he decided to answer, and it was just so funny. It was so funny. And the moose call, I'll give this a whirl. I was told I sound like a male. So this is the moose call, but that's the way it was done back then. And then they were speared or arrowed back in the day. Fire was flint and steel didn't happen until after the Europeans came. So prior to that, it was bow drill. And they would have a rock and they would make a drill, but this would be a vine, okay? This is New Age. This is a cord. So they would take some, I'll show you. It's easier to show you. And then they would take char cloth. Char cloth, back then you would take just the leather, the hide, and put it near the fire so that it would get really, really, really hard, because that's what you want your spark to get on, okay? And it will keep that spark alive so that you can get your little nest going and start to smoke. Today, because leather is so expensive, we take a white cotton t-shirt, and I take old ones, it doesn't matter, and you put them in a tin, and you get what you call char cloth. And this is what your spark is going to land on, okay? And that keeps that spark alive so that you can get it into your nest. So the bow drill, you can tell mine's been used a little bit. Let's see if I can get this going. I have good days and bad. So you put your piece of char cloth underneath this stick right here. Maybe I'll try this one. And you're going to brace your arm. You might see smoke come out. And you do it until you get a spark. But you can smell the heat.
Oh, yeah.
Don't touch it. He doesn't want you to burn your nose.
Yes.
Okay? So you can smell the heat from the friction. So after, of course, when the Europeans came, there was flint and steel. So the steel had to be tempered, which means, you know, like red hot, and put in the water, okay? And this piece I tempered. And you want your flint to be really sharp, okay? So let's see if I can make some sparks. I won't set the place on fire, I
I
promise.
heard Steve was right next to you.
There you go. There you go. You got everything right here. All right, let's see if I can make this.
Yeah.
So that's how, and it went on that char cloth, and they kept that spark alive, okay? So that's when the Europeans came. When the Europeans came, our whole life changed. But we're going to do one more thing, or a couple more things before. We would also make a basket out of vines. Today, we sort of use cotton string and make a pouch or make a big bag. It takes months and months to make a big bag, but the big bag was for food storage. Okay? I'm making this one. It's not pretty. We did a class where we were doing finger weaving, and that's what this is, that's how this is. I will pass this around because it's unbelievable. Mine's, like I said, not pretty. This is the first one I've ever done, and I haven't finished it yet. So communication back in that day was verbal. But if we looked out that window and up the hill there and we saw some smoke and we knew that there was some other people there, but we didn't know who they were or if they were friendly, we would make a belt or have a belt out of wampum. A lot of people think that wampum meant that was money. It wasn't money. The more wampum you had, the more prestigious, I guess, you could be. But it didn't mean that you were, it wasn't for monetary, okay? It was for celebration and for communication. Now for celebration, we would use it for adornment, for jewelry, or what have you. For, if a couple got married, we would make a wedding belt for them. And as their family grew, we would add to that wedding belt. If somebody crossed over, we would make a belt in their honor. Any type of celebration, we make a belt for. That's how our history was. You know, like we didn't have numbers like we have today. Like in 1770 something, this happened. We didn't have that. We had the day that the star was on fire that season. Okay, it could have been a comet, it could have been something significant. That was a time, okay? So it's not like today. But let's say those folks up there, we didn't know what they were. Okay. Wampum comes from this shell here, the Coas shell. Coak. I never say it right.
Quahog.
Quahog. I gotta remember hog part.
Yeah.
And it's out of the ocean, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. Okay? We didn't have this here. It had to be traded. We did a lot of trading. Okay? So that's what this shell is. And this, it's got beautiful purple. So we make a belt. So we're gonna send a runner up the hill to find out if these people are nice or not. So this is the belt. And so we have a peace pipe on this side. If we flop it over, it's a tomahawk. If you hold it this way, it's still a tomahawk. So it's going to go up the hill with a runner. However it comes back is going to tell us if it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. But nothing's ever a bad thing. So it comes back like this. So what are we going to do? We are going to get the food out. We're going to get the fire going. We're going to get the drum ready. We're going to have a party. We're going to invite them over for supper. We're going to trade. We're going to sing. We're going to dance. There might be a wedding there. You never know what's going to happen. If it comes back like this, okay, we know they're not so friendly. So what are we going to do? We're going to get the food out, we're going to get the drum out, we're going to get the fire going, and we're going to sing, and we're going to dance, and it's probably going to be the warrior song, and we'll take care of business tomorrow. But everything's a celebration. We celebrate everything, a birth, a good harvest, a good hunt. Everything's a celebration. And you can make a belt in that regard. Now, wampum is very expensive. So if you wanted a one bead, it would run you about $15 for that one bead. I cheat like the Dickens. This is all polymer clay that I've baked because I can't afford all that stuff. So this is a replica of what a belt would look like, okay? So, and I teach this in schools. The kids will make themselves a little bracelet and out of wampum. And I think this might be real wampum. This was a gift, so I'm thinking this one might be real. At least in my mind. Kids played with toys. Cornhusk dolls. okay? One of our citizens wrote a book. I've been taking, last year, I went back to college. So I went to Middlebury College last year and I took a linguistics class to learn the Abenaki language.
Oh, funny.
I'm going back this year. I don't know what I'm thinking. But it was fun, but it was really, really, really hard. But anyway, one of the girls wrote a book on the corn husk doll and the story of the corn husk doll. And it's written in Abenaki and in English. And I was the mystery reader at my school this week for grade 2. So I read it to the kids. So corn husk dolls. Okay, we did talk about snow snake. Snow snake, you take a twig, you file it down, you can grease it up or use honey or use wax from the bees or whatever, and it's a canal that goes down. And then you take your snake, it can be this long, it can be this long, however you make it. And you take your snake and you go to the beginning of the canal and you sit there and you work it a little bit and then you slide it down. So whoever goes the fastest, that's the winner. Then you get 3 tries or however you want to do it. During COVID, after school started back up, the kids had to stay in pods. And usually in the winter time, they would have one day of winter activity, whether it be at Burke Mountain or Northwood Stewardship or Jay Peak or wherever. But not all of them could go. It was one group. So like our 8th graders went to Burke, and then only one grade at a time could go to Northwoods. So all the rest of the kids got stuck in the building. And so I built a snow snake track out in the back so that while all those were enjoying their winter activity day, they could all take turns each pod and go out and play snow snake. And then Newport Town School called and said, "Can you build one here?" And then Jay Westfield School called and, "Can you build one here?" So anyway, now snow snake is part of the winter activity for the kids, and they're enjoying it. It's good competition. So this is one of the games, and you just wind this little puppy up. It's supposed to sound like a helicopter when you get done. You have to do it pretty tight. And that's what you want, okay? So, and the kids will play with that. Cat's Cradle, Abenaki game, okay? Lacrosse, native game. Still play it here in Vermont. Pick up sticks. This one I need to fix. You can take a bundle of sticks, tie them together, and with that string, attach it to another stick, and then you have to put it up and try to spear it with that one stick. My birch bark broke, so I've got to get a new piece. So if you put a birch bark, put a perfect hole in the middle, tie a piece of sinew to a ball of leather, and you try to hit the hole. That's another game that the kids would play. Storytelling happens in the wintertime. When they're all in the longhouse, that's the time that they do inside work and they tell stories and they teach the kids. Grandparents were the school teachers back in those days. And they would teach the kids old stories, you know, like the story of maple syrup, how it came to be. Back in the day, when the earth was here, was made, Creator would enjoy listening to the village people hustle and bustle and gather their fruits or their vegetables, and kids play. The smell of the smoke from the fire made Creator happy. And then there came a time where there was no noise. There was no hustle and bustle of the people. And there were no children laughing, and the fire was cold. There was no smell, and the harvest was not being harvested in the fields. So he sent Gluskabe. Gluskabe is like a demigod, I guess maybe you'd say. He could be a trickster. He could be a pain. But anyway, he sent him down to find out what was going on, and he walked in the village, and fire's cold. There's no noise. Harvest is rotting, and he can't find anybody. So he goes back to Creator and he says, I can't find the people. He said, there's nobody around. I don't know. There's no kids laughing, nothing. He goes, you go back down and you go look around for them and see what you can find. So Gluskabe goes back and he's looking around and the village is still. No fire, no people, no kids laughing. And all of a sudden he kind of hears this sound. Gulp, gulp, gulp. So he goes into the wood and there are the people. Each one has their own tree and pure maple syrup is coming out of that tree. And they're just consuming that syrup. And these people were just laying there, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So he goes back to Creator and he tells them what he's found. And Creator said, oh, well, we're going to fix this. This is not okay. So he made this big blanket of snow come over the ground. And then all of a sudden, this maple syrup started to not come out of the trees anymore. And then the people are kind of gulping for air here. And so they slowly start to move around. And there's some going on. And they're moving around. And they're going back to the village. And that first winter was pretty hard. When it came spring, that snow melted. And they got excited thinking maple syrup's going to come out of the tree again. And it didn't. It was water that came out of the tree. It was sap that came out of the tree. And then they learned that they had to boil that sap down to make maple syrup. And it was only a season that they were allowed to have it. And it's not like today with the big industry. You can have syrup year round because you can bottle it. It was that short time period. That's all they had for it. And they had to use it then. And that was all they had. And you know, of course, as they cooked it, you've got the sugar on the pot and what have you. So, but that's the story of maple syrup and how it came to be. And so you ask the kids, what lesson did you learn from that? Well, you have to work for anything that you really want, and you can't just be lazy, you know. So every story sort of has a lesson. Okay. Now, a fun one is how we got our calendar. So, how many months in a year? 12. How many days in a month? 30, 31, 28. We just had 29. Okay, so that's the white man's calendar. Ours, we go by a lunar calendar. We go by the moon. So every new moon is the beginning of our new month. And our new month has 28 days. How do we know this? We had to learn this somehow. So we learned it from Turtle. Turtle told us. Anybody ever read the book 13 Moons on a Turtle's Back? Large tiles right here, 13 of them. Those are our moons. And this is constant. As the turtle grows bigger, the tile grows bigger. They don't grow more tiles. Okay? Around the edge are 28 small tiles, and that's our days of the month. And all turtles are like that, not tortoise. Okay? Different breed, but all turtles. And our calendar is, of course, a female calendar, but that's how our calendar came to be. Okay? So storytelling is big, but only in the wintertime. We're kind of, it spit snow today, so I'm okay. All right? So actually I had snow when I left the house. It had, yeah. So at this point, do you have any questions? I did bring the big drum. I was hoping the girls were going to come up because I would have them drum with me and do a couple of songs and that kind of thing. But if you want to. Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak to the difference between Abenaki and Abenaki?
They're both the same. It's just in the dialect. Okay, in Canada, it's Abenaki. Here, a lot of us will say Abenaki. Abenaki, Abenaki, it doesn't matter. It's just like the dialect. It's like saying tomato or tomato. You know, that's how that works. It's not. Sir.
Did the Mohawk Nation extend how far south?
They extended into Connecticut and Massachusetts.
Connecticut.
Yeah,
I knew they were in
yeah,
Massachusetts.
and most of New York too. Yeah, and yes, ma'am.
Not to interrupt your answer to
No,
him.
it's okay.
Okay. You passed around that little corn cob, and it's a heritage breed, obviously, and I've grown some heritage breeds, but I've also grown Abenaki beans, or what
Yes.
was told to me is Abenaki, on corn. Now, I grew it on this ridiculously tall 13-foot corn that had two ears at the top which were huge, which when the thunderstorm came, blew the whole thing down so the beans wouldn't ripen. But anyways, my question is, how tall was the corn that they grew? Yeah, because other heritage breeds were only like
They were
four
not. They
to
were not
6
that.
feet tall.
We tried to grow at one of my schools, the Three Sisters.
Yeah, I did
And
that last year.
they grew the Abenaki corn, but they grew the domestic beans from nowadays, and it just smothered that poor corn. It was like all beans, and it just didn't work. So then
Yeah.
they did a tripod,
Right.
and then but it's still they grew up the tripod, and the corn didn't have the sunlight that it just went nuts. So it's a delicate thing to try to do, and there's various kinds of beans. There's the skunk beans.
Right, that's what I grew. The
I love
Abenaki
those.
skunk beans.
Hmm.
And this is just a little sample. I got about.
There's red beans. There's all kinds, and the squashes. We're trying to get back to the heritage squash. There's the East Calais squash. There's the Worcester squash. We've got various Vermont squashes that we're
But then were the beans not as tall? Because my Abenaki beans probably got 13 to 14 feet long.
I can't answer that.
Okay. I mean, they produced really well, the ones that I grew on the trellises, because
Mhm.
they didn't get to be
And
knocked
they
down by.
probably use trellises. I can't say that maybe they
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah.
It's we don't have any artifacts or any. It's all verbal. We don't have anything
Right, okay.
concrete to show to say. It's
I'm
all
gonna
verbal.
continue growing, 'cause
They're
my-
good stuff.
They
They're
are very
great
good stuff.
protein.
My first batch was 14 measly seeds in a packet, which I paid like $5 for. I planted them all, they did well, and then I had a quart of seed at the end of the year. And then last year's when I planted the quart of seed, and I got about close to 3 gallons of
That's awesome.
seed. And so, save about a quart per seed,
Mhm.
and then I'll save the rest to eat.
That's awesome.
So, but I was just so
We
curious.
saved the seeds from the corn and we planted
Yeah, I
those
saved
again
all my
last year.
corn
Yeah.
seeds.
So, and I think my flint corn is with another teacher because it's a golden rust color. It's really beautiful.
I'm finding like with my sons that they don't want to hear about the history of our family. And I tell people when that generation is 50, they're going to pay Ancestry.com to find out stuff because they won't listen now. But are you finding like your generation of Abenaki, are your children and grandchildren interested? Or they learn?
Mine are.
They learn to do things.
My son, not so much. My daughter, yes, and my grandson lives his heritage. He's incredible. He wants to know. The first presentation I did, well, my daughter now lives in Arkansas, and they lived with me for a little while in between her jobs, and I did a presentation for the Holland Historical Society. So Cedric came with me, and I said, Jess, why don't you come too? And because she doesn't know what I do, So she came, and then on the way home, Cedric said to her, he goes, Mama, that's who we are. We need to know this stuff. And so she's put forth the effort. She's active with the tribe, and I taught the kids the songs. And when I went to visit with them at Christmas last year, I had made them hand drums for Christmas the year before, and they brought their hand drums out. And Mima, teach us another song. So they keep their heritage. They sing their songs, and I'm proud of them. I'm proud of them. So we do, yes.
You mentioned Newt Washburn, he was from Bethlehem, New Hampshire. wasn't he?
Yes, I
He's
did a
15.
presentation at that library in the fall.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
And he's gone now, but his
He's
family's
gone.
still.
yeah,
still there.
they're still around.
Yeah, he used to do the state craft show circuit like Sunapee and
Hmm.
those.
And his son Tony lives in Morrisville, Vermont, and he's married to my cousin.
Oh,
So we're all family.
Small
as
world.
You know, it's a small world, because when I mentioned Newt at the library, they go, oh, well, he just lives down the road. And I heard he lived down the road. And I went, really? And it was kind of fun.
another thing, my late wife and I listened to the whole Clan of the Cave Bear, Queen Gene Owl,
Yeah,
and much of your heritage must have gone into that book, that series of books.
a lot of those, yes, and they did a lot
Like,
of
like
research.
the Flint. I remember
Yeah,
when Ayla discovered fire.
yeah. So it was pretty cool. Mm. Girls, you want to help me do a song? Each of you grab a chair and bring it up here. So the drum is something that we hold in our tribe very sacred, okay? The kids can't just come up and start touching it. We call the drum the heartbeat of Mother Earth. And when we drum, well, grab a chair, baby girl. And when we drum, the vibration of that drum goes into the ground. And the drum is a healing tool also. I don't know what I was thinking. I decided I would do drumming in an after-school program at this school. And they said, well, how about grades 4 and 5? So I had 11 kids sign up. Each one of those kids was some type of special needs. And they're kids that I see regularly. And I was like, what was I thinking? Because these guys are wild. And I gotta tell you, that was the best class I ever had. Because those boys listened, and they were all boys. And those boys listened, and they sang, and they asked questions. They wanted to learn Abenaki words. And today, when they came into the school, they came in and they saw me, and they go, "Quai quai, Miss Lucy," which means hello. And then they said, "Oule spons oui oui." And I go, "Oule spons oui oui," which is good morning. And I'd have thought they'd have forgotten that one overnight, but they did not. So anyway, they just totally blew my mind. They were amazing. So ladies, we are going to drum, and I'm going to teach you a nursery song that maybe a grandparent would have taught the kids when they were little, okay? I've embellished this song. When I first learned this song, there were only 2 animal sounds. And today we have, of course, a whole lot more animals. And this drum was made in 1993 in Derby Line, Vermont. There was a women's group called the Nebsack Women. Okay, so I'm gonna have you here. Bring your chair. You gotta bring your chair. Okay, maybe one here and one there. Let's push this back. I'm gonna maybe have you close the door, if that's okay. Man, they like this.
What kind of hide do you use on that drum?
This one is not buffalo. It's moose,
Moose hide? No.
but we would use deer. Today
Yeah.
we'd use cow
Yeah.
because we need something big.
Yeah.
If you're making a drum like this, hang on, I gotta. Excuse me, darling. who tied this the last time, but. There we go. There, now I'm happy. That looks more even. Okay, so how do you put, yeah, right there. There, right here maybe? Okay. So I'm going to have you cover your lap.
Zero.
Because normally Coosuk wears a skirt. And I'm going to have you do this. Okay, there we go. So, when we drum, normally, we would take tobacco and we'd say a prayer and put the tobacco on the drum. Even before that, we would probably take sage and heat, get it hot, and we would smudge. That's so that all the feelings and everybody playing on the drum are good feelings. Nothing bad, no hatefulness, no anything, just good kindness. So when we pass the drumsticks around, you're going to tack it, give it to her, you're going to give it to her, okay? Everything is clockwise. Everything is clockwise. Our drumsticks, look, no, you keep it. That one's yours. Our drumsticks either look like a cat tail or a corn dog. Okay? So before we open the drum leader, which is going to be me, is going to give 4 honor beats. So the 4 honor beats are honoring the 4 directions. The east, we're the Abenaki people, the Abenaki people, we're the people of the dawn. We're the first ones to see the sunrise, okay? And then the south, the west, and the north. So I'm going to go ahead and give it 4 honor beats. Now she's been in the back of my truck, so it's a little cold, so she's probably going to thud. Not so bad. So when we start to drum, theoretically, because a lot of people when we're having a gathering or something, we all just start to drum together. But theoretically, we're supposed to take turns. So like I would start as the leader, okay? I would give you the look, and then you will join me. I'll give you the look, and you'll join. And I give you the look, and then we join, okay? So the first song we're going to do is like a repeat after me, okay? When you hear an animal sound, you've got to repeat it. So can you do yip yip?
Yip, yip, yip.
Can you guys do yip yip? Yip yip yip. I think they can help us. All right.
So we
Any
do it
animals?
4 times?
No, I have already done that. So I've awoken the drum, okay? So when you hear the animal sound, you have to repeat it, okay? Everybody.